and continue the conversation. I'll start from the beginning in case you missed the beginning and we got cut out. All right, I got cut off about 5 minutes in. What we're talking about today is why visualization does not work for everyone. My name is Judy V and I am the originator of the Codex system. And I'm going to bring a conversation today that is going to give a completely and utterly different perspective on all things visualization and more. Okay, people have visualized their life for years, the perfect life for years, but life did not move. And if visualization changed the structure, more people would be then living lives that they keep rehearsing, right? Understood, right? That's plain, simple. Agree? If visualization changed the structure, then more people would be living the lives that they keep rehearsing. The image was clear. I don't think people have an issue with the image, the visualization, the actual act of it. The image is clear, but the receiving structure was not. And this is why visualization does not work for everyone. The future you imagine is not the same as the system that has to receive it. And this is not only about visualization. We have treated output as origin. We've treated behavior as origin, thoughts, feelings, nervous system responses, story, meaning, vision, purpose, future self-identity. We've treated all of that as origin. We've treated what appears as the place where change begins. So we change the thought. We change belief, we change the story, we change our state, we change identity. We change the name of the pattern, but they did not change what was generating the life in the first place. And the self literally got a new costume while the structure kept the keys. They renamed the output and mistook the new name for freedom. And in my world, that's not freedom. It is management with a better language. More of life being managed, more of body holding, checking, bracing, more of the system preparing, more of us becoming, more focus on becoming, more of the future being rehearsed instead of actually lived. And in my world, that's what I call the contained human. And it doesn't mean life's failing. It doesn't mean anything's failing. Like, you can still function inside of management, but it's functioning inside of management. You may still get more awareness and more tools to use, more breakthroughs. But what happens when the same output appears under pressure? The pattern doesn't end. There's just a more sophisticated language or explanation. And when you start to see this, everything changes. Everything has to change. The future self-work, the embodiment work, the frequency work, the belief work, nervous system regulation work, becoming the next version of yourself work. All of it has to be placed into a different hierarchy, because the question isn't, can I see my future clearly enough? The correct question we need to be asking is, what happens when the future gets close enough to require movement? Because that's when the proverbial rubber hits the road. What happens when money gets close? What happens when attention gets close? What happens when the relationship gets close or the decision needs to be made? This is where the truth appears. It's not in the image, it's not in the vision, and it's not in the dream. It's in the moment the imagined future starts asking to become real. And that's where I begin. That's all I'm interested in beginning at. Because I want to ask a different question. And I want you to hear me when I say this, and I want you to feel what happens for you when I say it. What if pain and struggle, effort, doubt, fear, uncertainty did not require years of work to resolve? Imagine. No more mindset work, belief work, reframing, no more healing, no more visualizing a future version of yourself, no more trying to embody a version of yourself who can finally move, no more regulating yourself into the right state. Frequency work, alignment work, nervous system work, or endless examination of what might still be blocking you. None of that. And get to live life fully. Because at some point, the examination becomes containment. At some point, the work becomes the way the pattern continues. At some point, you're not being freed. You're being trained to manage yourself more intelligently. And in my world, that's not freedom. I think that's a life under supervision. A life where every movement needs a state first, every decision needs a readiness first, every future needs an identity first. That is not freedom. That is the contained human with a better vocabulary. And it's everywhere. It's with the woman who says she wants visibility, but first she needs to regulate the fear of being seen. The man who says he wants more money, but he first has to clear the blocks he has about receiving. Or the person who says they want love, but first they need to heal their attachment wounds. Or it's in the business owner who says they know the move, but they wait to first feel aligned. It's in the person who says they want the body to change, but first need to understand what the symptoms mean. Those layers can be real, but real doesn't make them origin. Fear can be real. Nervous system response can be real. The story can be real. I know my story is real, and I know yours is too. It's real, but it does not mean source. It does not mean original. It does not mean causal. That is the mistake. It does not get to be the operating system of your life. We've made visibility into an issue of shame. We've made money into an issue of worth. We've made love into an issue of attachment. Movement into an issue of readiness. Freedom into an issue of becoming. And then we wonder why everything takes years. Of course it takes years if you keep working on what appears after the interference has already happened. That is the point. My whole life, people have said to me over and over and over again, how do I make things happen so fast? It's because I do not live a managed life. I am not contained. Because if you keep starting after the root has already taken authority, you will keep needing more work, more explanation, more management, more inner investigation. Because that intervention is late. And late work can become very sophisticated. It can become very intelligent and sound very spiritual. It can sound very trauma-informed and sound very embodied. It can sound quantum, it can sound aligned, but sophistication does not make it origin. We are a society with more awareness than ever before. We have more insight, we have more knowledge. But what has it changed? We understand more intelligently, and we relate to it more compassionately. We regulate more skillfully and build more empowered identities around it, while leaving what generates it in the first place untouched. And this is why so many people get trapped in endless inner work. Because every time the output repeats, the conclusion is there must be something else in me. Another block, another belief, another wound, another regulation issue, another deeper thing I've not yet found, another inner crime scene to manage. And I am saying no, enough. Enough now. Just because something has not changed does not mean there is something wrong with you. When something still has not changed, stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking, where is this actually being produced? It just simply means the root producing the output. And that is a very different conversation. Because if the issue is not that you are broken, blocked, wounded, misaligned, unsafe, unworthy, unhealed, or not yet the version of yourself who can move, then the whole economy around endless self-examination starts to lose authority. I'm not denying the response. I'm relocating its authority. I'm saying this. These are not the place where life is being generated. That's what I'm saying. What we are focusing on. They are just the evidence of what is being generated. And that evidence is not origin. And that mistake has cost people years, decades of trying to feel better before moving, regulate before acting, heal before receiving, years of explaining a pattern that still had authority. And when the pattern kept returning, the person blamed themselves. That old inner crime scene. And that is the cruelty of it. The model fails, but the person becomes the problem. Can you see the issue here? Because what if the failure is not in you? What if the intervention point is wrong? What if the work has been aimed at what appears after the interference has already happened? That is what keeps people looping and looping and looping and looping and spiraling. And this is why we are a society with the greatest level of awareness than the history probably of mankind. When I work with someone, I'm not looking for a better explanation of the pattern. I'm not looking for the next emotional layer. I'm not looking for the deeper story. I'm not looking for another identity that you need to become. I'm looking at where direct movement has been interrupted before behavior appears, where the body starts to manage, where the signal, your signal, loses clean authority, where you start needing pressure, preparation, state, safety, clarity, identity, or permission before life is allowed to move. That is where Codex enters. Through the Codex system, I read the root, R-O-U-T-E, the root, not the root, R-O-O-T. I read the root producing what keeps repeating. Codex names and classifies the architecture of that root. The work clears interference at the generating layer, not at the layer where you are already starting to manage the consequence. And that is the difference, and that is the major difference. That is a major difference, because freedom should not require another identity to maintain. Movement should not require you to first become someone capable of it, because the truth is, you already are. Life should not require a constant inner committee before the next move is allowed, because your next move is right there. Without your help, without your management, without your supervision, and certainly without any permission required. You should not need to regulate yourself into permission. You should not need to become the one who is finally ready, because the one trying to become may be the very structure keeping the loop alive. And this is the part that I'm seeing that people are not seeing. The self doing the work may not be the exit. It may be the continuity mechanism. The self-improving itself, the self-regulating itself, the self-healing itself, the self-becoming itself. All the while, the root remains untouched. The pattern keeps the keys. So what I am bringing here in this conversation today is not about whether visualization is good or bad. That's too small a topic. This is about the level at which change can be, or change is being attempted. And if you're working on the image, the belief, the state, the identity, or the response after interference has already happened, you may get relief. You may get more insight. You will get more insight. You may get a momentary state shift. But if the same output returns under pressure, then something has not been reached, which will have you go back for more management. And that something is not another thing to diagnose inside yourself. It is the generating structure that needs to be seen, addressed through clearing. And that is why I say the dream or the vision is not where the pattern is exposed. Proximity is. Proximity is the issue. The proximity is where the evidence is seen, when the money gets close, when the visibility gets close, when the love gets close, when the decision moment gets close, when the body asks for a different relationship, when the life you say you want stops being an idea and begins requiring movement. That is where the truth appears. Not in the vision, not in the affirmation, not in the future self-identity. In the moment the future starts asking to become real. And that is where most people return to management, more prep, more regulation, more refinement. Go back to working more on themselves. And then that life stays held. That is containment. A life that works because you keep managing it. a life held in constant preparation, held in identity, held in state management, held in fear, held in uncertainty, held in the next thing that must be resolved before movement is allowed. And that is why I am opening a Codex experience in September, simply called Don't Go Deeper, Go Earlier. Because the project was never you. It's a live 3-day online Codex event. And the first invitations will go to the people who are receiving my Codex cuts on my list, for those on my list who receive Codex cuts. This 3-day event will be a free event. Don't go deeper, go earlier. And will be open to those on my list first. Because the list is what I call the Codex cut. Because I don't want people just joining another mailing list. I want you to start seeing this now. So 3 times a week, I send one cut, one sentence, one structural interruption, something that puts pressure on the explanation you were about to use. You may have seen them. I've posted a few of them on my Facebook timeline. For example, you were not unaware, just awareness arrived late. That's a cut. Or nothing collapsed. You managed everything. That's a cut. Short, but it relocates the problem. Because maybe nothing collapsed precisely because you became extraordinarily good at managing everything. But at what cost? That's where all life force energy, that's where your capacity, that's where your everything, life force energy goes into management instead of living. And maybe awareness didn't fail. Maybe it simply arrived after something had already moved. And that is what Codex cuts are designed to interrupt, not motivate. They're not motivation. They're not quotes. They do not give another affirmation. You do not need affirmations. Not to give you something clever to agree with. And definitely not another newsletter to collect and never read. The Codex cut takes seconds to read. But the sentence stays with you. So over the next few weeks, the cuts are going to begin to open the territory we will enter properly in September. Because the 3-day event, Don't Go Deeper, Go Earlier, is not another challenge. It's not a masterclass. It's not a future self-work. It begins with a much more disruptive possibility. What if you were never the project? What if the fear was already late? What if the doubt was already late? What if the belief is already late? What if the identity is already late? The block you spent years looking at was already late. What happens when instead of going deeper and deeper into what appeared, we go earlier than that? And that is what these 3 days are about. We stop going deeper into what already appeared and we go earlier. Earlier than thought, earlier than fear, earlier than state, than story, than identity. Earlier than the management that has been holding life in place. Because the issue is not always that life is unavailable. The issue is that life is being held before it can move. The issue is that life is being contained, managed, supervised before it can move. And when you see where that holding begins, the problem relocates. You stop looking at the image. You stop looking at the vision. You stop looking at the state. You stop looking at the identity. You stop assuming there must be another block buried somewhere inside you, and you start making yourself the project. And you begin to see where what has already organizing, or what it was already organizing the output before any of those things appeared. And that changes the conversation completely. Because what I call the contained human is not someone whose life has failed. It's quite the opposite, actually. You might be functioning brilliantly, but an enormous amount of life is being used to manage life, manage fear, manage uncertainty, manage the body, manage money, manage movement, managing the self. The life works, but it requires a manager, and that is the containment. What becomes possible when the manager is no longer required? And that's where we're going. Not a better managed human, not another identity capable of holding more. Movement that no longer requires all of that first. So if you've spent years working on yourself and still find hesitation, effort, fear, uncertainty, doubt, contraction, or the same pattern returning instead of being removed in increasingly sophisticated forms, get on my list. And the first invitation to don't go deeper, go earlier, will go there. Because numbers are going to be limited with this event because of how I'm going to work with people inside the 3 days. This is not mass consumption content. It is not more information. And it's absolutely not another layer of inner work. The project was never you. Maybe it's time we stopped digging into you and went earlier. Start with the cuts. I'll put the link in the comments. And when September opens, don't go deeper, go earlier.